You know, most love stories typically start with really good first impressions or a shit ton of Viagra, right? Well, I mean, I don't know about you guys, but I just turned 40, so I'm probably going to have to take a lot of that shit in the future. But anyways, so since I was bored, and since a 40-year-old gets bored and he has to have a midlife crisis and the Corvette just won't do it, well, he buys a Ford GT. And he does it in a manner that reminds him of what his future holds, because Viagra pills are blue. You get it? Yeah, nope. Following me? Not really? Okay. The joke might have landed a little bit far if you're like 19 years old and masturbating on the internet, but at some point you'll know what I'm talking about. So today we are doing a review of my latest long-term collection car, the Ford GT. Now, it might be very surprising that I just used that word long-term collection car, because in my original teaser of having received this car, I said it is going to be interesting to see if it stays or it doesn't. And today we're not only going to review the car, we're going to go on a first drive together and really see if the Ford GT lives up to its original heritage of what it was always meant to be. Because I've always said that first impressions are important. And the first impressions of this car are everything should go wrong. I mean, from the key I showed you last time, which is the same key that they have in a Ford Raptor or some Mustang or something. I don't even think they upgraded the logo. But anyways, so from that, all the way to the fact that this has a V6 EcoBoost. Like, really? Like, we're supposed to feel good about paying $600,000 new and $1 million used for an EcoBoost twin turbo car? And fine, it makes 700 horsepower, like almost, but it still doesn't make sense, right? Like, really? Like the same crap they put in like the Raptors and stuff, or like all of those cars? They put the same crap in here? Like, you know, you kind of get disappointed. They use the same key, they use the same stuff, and you go, how is this ever going to be a long-lasting relationship? But then you start to understand the car a little bit more. And this is one of the big things I've always talked about at Exotic Car Hacks, is that the big difference between a car reviewer and what we do here on this channel is that I actually own all the cars I feature. So these aren't borrowed cars. This is my actual car. And what ends up occurring here on this channel is that we get to see over time how much my love or hate for a car keeps growing or coming down based on usage of the car, right? Not just one test drive, one time. I've always said it's near impossible, no matter how subjective you are and how many cars you've driven, to really understand a car with 1 or 2 test drives. You have to live with a car to realize, out of 20 cars you own, how many times you actually want to get in it and drive it versus another. Because I've always said that the best thing about exotic cars is not the speed, is not the handling, is not everything that happens, but it's rather all of these things together in what I call the experience of the car. And I think that's the most powerful content and aspect of owning a supercar, is that it's not about the speed. You can buy a much cheaper car that goes much faster. You can buy a much cheaper car that handles better, but you can't get the same experience all around as some of these cars. Like, I guarantee you that even a Nissan GT-R blew the doors off of my Lamborghini SVJ. Let's say it did, which it didn't at the Nürburgring, but let's say it does that on the street. It still doesn't matter, because the overall experience of a Lamborghini SVJ is mind-boggling. And the experience of a Nissan GT-R is basically like, okay, let me put it this way. You walk into a room and, yeah, I was gonna go into a really bad joke. I mean, I'm just gonna, okay. Basically, the Nissan GT-R is a fat chick in the room, and the, you know, SVJ is the absolute top of the line performing porn star that does more than just do you right. She looks at you right, she does you right, she plays with you right, and she finishes you perfectly. There's a difference between that entire experience and just walking in a room and being like, you're just really good at giving head, right? Like, so 2 different completely things. But now we're going to take a look at this car, because this car, I'm going to call it not the best car that's ever been made, but rather the biggest surprise of a supercar I have ever encountered in my life. And starting with just the most basic of things, which you really don't expect from Ford. You ready for this? I'm gonna say this. I know it's really like gonna hurt. This is a really high quality car. Like really, really high quality car. Every body panel fits right. The carbon fiber weave is perfect. The parts are durable. The interior doesn't look like it's getting old, and it doesn't, it's like really well made. Even the carbon fiber wheels, compared to what Ferrari does, run carbon fiber all the way to the inside, while Ferrari stops right at the edge, giving you a weird like gray on the inside, versus these are full carbon wheels. But here's the most incredible part about it. Look at this paint job. It is literally a tri-coat layered, whatever the hell they call it, and it changes from one blue to another with this pearl on it. But here's the most incredible part. Lamborghini charges $20,000 for premium paint. Ford charges under 10. So why? The car's twice as big as my Estilo, but the paint costs half as much, and it's got a painted stripe? Like, really? Like, you can start to see where value comes in play with having an American manufacturer make a supercar versus an Italian one. So really, really interesting and surprising to see the quality, because remember, this is not rivaling $1 million cars. This is rivaling a $600,000 car, which is basically, this is Aventador territory, technically, right? And now Aventadors are actually matching with the Ford GT, even on the used market. So coming around the car, you'll notice beautiful carbon fiber wheels. We've got all the carbon fiber package, Acropavic exhaust, which is a factory upgrade. So it has all of these things and the cool stuff you need, right? And then you have this race mode where the wing goes up and the car goes down. It doesn't stay down when you turn it off, but we'll take a look at that later. So I just want you to understand, quality is there, which is incredible. And here's where things get even more interesting. So on the inside of the car, which we're gonna go through all the buttons and stuff, but on the inside of the car, you have a car whose seat doesn't move. So you're always kind of sitting in the center of the car, but the steering wheel and the pedals move with just a button to give you the perfect seating position. Also interesting and different. And this is where things get really exciting. This is a very different car. It's very different than anything else I've ever driven, and it's very different than anything else on the road. And here's where it gets even more exciting than that. If you've watched a review of my 2006, which I still hold, a 4-option 2006 1,000 horsepower Ford GT, I was always kind of anti-new Ford GT because I said, well, it doesn't really work, because first impressions were, well, you pay 4 times what the old Ford GT is. It doesn't really have a record like the old Ford GT. It doesn't have the historic advantage, and it's got a V6 EcoBoost. So I don't really get why this is $1 million and the other one isn't. And then you start to think, well, the other one's definitely coming up to the 500K range now. So we're gonna start seeing them surpass these. But something extraordinary happens with these cars. And I think this is what really makes the Ford GT what it is. It's the unexpected animal that exists within the car, and it just works so well. Like, so well. And I'm gonna say this, and again, I know, first thing I said is a quality car, which is mind-boggling for a Ford. But the second thing I'm gonna say, which is gonna like sound pretty, I know this is gonna be pretty like brutal. I'm like on even mode with how much I love my SVJ, and yet I've only driven this car twice. That's a pretty crazy statement, because I've been holding pretty strong that I don't enjoy the P1 as much as the SVJ, I don't enjoy the Senna as much as the SVJ, I don't enjoy the STO as much as the SVJ, but I have a feeling this is gonna win my heart over. And I'm gonna tell you something about how much I love this car and why I love it. Every part of this car, every piece of this car is unique to this car. Meaning, like, I don't have another exotic or hypercar where the steering wheel moves and the pedals move and the seat doesn't. I don't have another car where it's put together in craftsmanship so well and it doesn't rattle inside, it doesn't make any weird noises, and it can be very usable in normal mode and incredibly crazy in race mode. And like crazy to the point where I feel like this is the old man's version of Mustang GT, because I took off like a couple of times in sport and track, and the rear end just kind of like wants to let loose, and you go, holy shit, I'm about to create a Mustang problem for millionaires, you know? But the problem here is that it's just very hard to find faults in this car. And this is one of the reasons it brings back the entire idea of why people love supercars to begin with and don't have to hate them. And this is, listen, with the AMG GT Black, I started hating the car and I started little by little liking the car. I still don't love the car. With the 4 GT, I have a feeling I'm gonna love the car and it's gonna take a lot to make me dislike the car. The radio and Bluetooth work instantly. It has tech that's usable. The AC works. The steering wheel's very F1 race-like. The interior doesn't rattle. All the buttons seem to work, and while some of them still feel very Fordish, the car works, and it works really well. And it works so well that you can forgive the imperfections like the key and some of the buttons because you have everything else that comes together so perfectly. But I guess it all depends on what you really love about the car. And what I mean by that is you either love the car for being your only supercar, and then you might feel like you're missing out on the excitement of other cars, or you love the car for the experience it creates. And in my personal collection, I've always been seeking cars that are incredibly unique rather than just popular. So one of the reasons why I don't have a GT2 RS or don't really care that much for the 911s is that there's nothing exciting about them. They're just a better version of something that's worked for 70 years. And I feel like it's just incredibly boring. And it doesn't excite you because you don't rediscover how to drive every time. You kind of go back into a bubble of I'm enjoying a lot of the things I've always enjoyed. And to me, evolution is about the new, the definition of pushing the envelope of what's possible. And I think manufacturers do a really good job at that with performance. They always say, we're the fastest, we handle better, we do this better. But they rarely bring something exciting and different to the table, where they go, this isn't what you expect, this isn't what it is, but you can still drive it normally, and when you're ready for it, it will blow your mind. And I think this is what is sad about the world, is that the world has become very bland. We're afraid to go outside of our limits, right? We're afraid to go outside of the comfortable. We typically, as soon as something becomes uncomfortable, we attempt to cancel it or hurt it. And one of the things that I love about this car is that it's like, it does all that, but it doesn't really scare you. It brings you closer to it. And it gets a lot of love on the street because obviously it's American and it's here, you know, in the United States, and people are proud of kind of the heritage of this car and what it's done to, you know, Ferrari back in the day. And it's incredible in that way, but it's more than that. It's not only just incredible because of its image, but it lives up to it and 10 times more. And it lives up to it to a point where when you drive it, you don't even remember that you're sitting in a 6-cylinder. I don't care how much power it makes because it sounds great, it looks great, and it just feels so unique and race-like that you realize that it's just going to be an incredible 10 minutes, 20 minutes, an hour, 2 hours driving the car. And even if your back hurts driving it because the seat aren't the most comfortable that's ever been out there, they're not uncomfortable, but they're also not there to make you feel comfortable in the car. They're there to keep you alert and keep you in focus of your driving. And while that discomfort may occur a little bit, it also reminds you that you're not in a normal Ford, and that the role of this car was not to appeal to everyone. It was to create an experience unique to itself, and if you don't love it, guess what? They didn't make enough for you anyways. And that's basically the gist of what I think of the Ford GT. So we already looked at the exterior features. Let's get in the car together and take a look at what the interior looks like and what are some of the coolest features of the car. Get in the car with me. All right, so here we are inside the car. And before we actually, turn it on, hear it, and talk about performance, let's talk about what's happening here, because a lot is happening and very little is happening at the same time. The first thing I told you is that the steering wheel basically is a fantastic piece of hardware, and it has your little steering LED stuff, no different than a Ferrari, and you have the adjustment here on the steering column and on the pedals. If you want to move the pedals, there's a little lever here on the side. You pull, the pedals will move up. You can adjust them down. If you want to move this steering wheel, there's a little lever here. You will pull it down, come in, come out, nothing different. The paddles here work just like any other car. They're large and usable. Nothing to say here specifically about paddles, but there is something wrong with these, which we're going to talk about a little bit later. The radio, very easy to use interface, touchscreen as well. Start button, like very easy to turn on. Your AC levels, nothing here is out of the norm. It's very user friendly. There is one, again, problem, no different than the STO, is that the volume on this is here instead of just being one of these quick buttons. I keep repeating to manufacturers in hopes that they listen that please make a radio with a little knob that is easy to go back to so we can hit a button instead of look in a completely different place for that interface. Here on the steering wheel, a lot is going on, like a lot. You have your volume control, your CD, like your forward, backward. See how old I am? I'm like 40 years old, so I still talk about CDs. You go forward and backward here, and you have your little buttons for your flashers, no different than the Huracan, you know, which all appears on one side, but here you have them on both sides. You have your little lever here for different modes, from track to street to normal to everything else. And you have your high beams, your windshield wipers, and that's it. A lot happens on the steering wheel here, which is cool. And then on this side, you only have your lights. That's about all that happens here on the dash. Here you'll find a lever, no different than you'll find probably in most, you know, like F-150s, Raptors and stuff. Your hazards, your suspension to be more in comfort mode or not, and then your lift. I will say with the lift, this car's lift operates faster than any other lift I've seen. Probably 1 to 2 seconds and the car is up, 1 to 2 seconds the car is down, and then your handbrake. You don't have much storage around here. You don't have much happening. You don't have much going on. And that creates a little bit of an issue because at first you might say, well, isn't that kind of simple? But that's how all exotics are. I mean, if you saw my review of the SVJ, there isn't a glove box either, and there's very little storage. There are little nets behind this usually in this case, and I don't see them here. So again, storage is always an issue. This is enough for your phone or key or something, and that's really it. You'll notice the dash is very, very hollow and creates a beautiful kind of design feature. Alcantara is here. The Alcantara quality of American cars has always been below the ones of Italians. I don't really know why, but at least it's still Alcantara, it's not plastic, which is a big plus over the last Ford GT. But again, that was in 2006 and ahead of its time then. Craftsmanship is fantastic. Quality is there and it's durable, which is fantastic. And each GT has a little tag here that shows you which number unit it is from the series it was, because they, again, I think make about 13 to 1,500 GTs total for all the years, the 5 years combined. I don't know how many each year, each model year, whatever, but that should give you an indication. On the door, you find all your regular features. And one interesting factor here is that if you actually look here on the door, you'll notice that the vents are in the door and only in the door here. So you don't really have vents here happening. You just have these vents here in both doors, which is, again, an interesting model and everything makes sense. So I just wanted to kind of show you this, and then we're going to go for a drive, and I'm going to share with you kind of the one thing that doesn't work on this car that well, that doesn't work in an exciting manner compared to other cars. Like, I've always given praise to Lamborghinis for this, and this is the one real big flaw in driving this car that I feel isn't as good as perhaps McLaren or Lamborghini, but everything else is on par with being one of the best supercars I have ever driven, owned, or had a chance to interact with. So incredibly impressed with the GT so far, and incredibly impressed with sharing with you guys this car in detail so you can really understand how spectacular it is. So let's get in, go for a drive. And again, remember, just before we do that, if for any reason you don't understand why it makes sense for me to have over $10 million in cars in the middle or in the midst of knowing that there's an economic recession coming to the United States, then you need to understand why car hacking has enabled me to go from being an immigrant that barely had a dollar to his name to now having this not only incredible car collection and a very, very high net worth, all of which by learning how to leverage assets and not lose money on the luxuries that we've been accustomed to becoming consumers of. Which is why, as always, with every video, you can look in the description of the video and find my link for a free 90-minute training where I'm going to walk you through how to do exactly what I do, why it makes sense, and why your favorite YouTube guys aren't as rich as they say they are. And you're going to have to kind of understand this new methodology of thinking about money and how it changes the game significantly when it comes to the car game anyways. So let's get in the car, go for a drive. And you can click the link now or click it later after watching the video. But I think on the drive, you're going to discover a couple of things about the GT that are pretty cool.
All right,
guys, so we are about to go for a drive, or we thought we were going to go for a drive, but as you can see, the distance between me and Reggie defies time. So basically, he's sitting over me, And I just want you to see this because this makes it a little bit difficult to go for a drive without me going into a wall. So perhaps we're going to save the drive for a GoPro video in the upcoming times. But anyways, my point that I was trying to make is that it's kind of tight in here, like very tight. And we'll probably catch you on the next video for Exotic Car Hacks where I installed some GoPros because, anyways, we were talking about hitting the treadmill. Catch you guys on the next one.